Back in 2002, while football games were fighting to become more realistic, one game went completely in the opposite direction. With no realism, no subtlety, no respect for the laws of the game, just chaos, and somehow it worked. Imagine FIFA, but the referee barely mattered. Imagine Pro Evolution Soccer, but every tackle looked like a WWE finishing move. This is the story of RedCard Soccer, the most unhinged football game of the PS2 era. So, back in the early 2000s, football gaming was changing fast. FIFA was coming more polished each year, and Pro Evolution Soccer was starting to dominate because of its gameplay, and football games in general were moving more towards realism, authentic teams, realistic movement, broadcast presentation. Everything was about making football feel real. Then Midway showed up and basically said, what happens if we ignored all that? And honestly, RedCard feels like a football simulation and more like someone's accidentally mixed football with an arcade fighting game. Because this game was violent, and not slightly aggressive football violent, I mean genuinely absurd violence. Players flew through the air, slide tackles looked career ending, referees got flattened, and most of the time the game barely cared. The crazy thing is, that was the entire point of the game. Even back then, reviewers didn't really know what to make of it. Looking at this article from BBC Sport, it's described as more of an arcade simulation rather than an out-and-out soccer title, which is probably the nicest way of saying this game is absolutely ridiculous. And they were right, because RedCard knew exactly what it was. It never tried to be FIFA at realism, it never tried to outplay PES tactically. Instead, it focused on one thing: fun. Pure, chaotic, over-the-top fun. The controls were simple: pass, shoot, tackle. Nothing complicated. But then there was one feature that changed everything: the boost button. This thing basically turned football into a contact sport and into another dimension. If you out boost while tackling someone, you didn't win the ball, you wiped the player out completely. And the BBC review again literally described tackles as sending opponents into the middle of next week. And honestly, that wasn't even an exaggeration. Players launched across the pitch like rag dolls. You could absolutely destroy people, and somehow this became part of the strategy. Then there were the shots, because if you boosted while shooting, the ball became an actual missile. Shots flew toward the goal with ridiculous speed and goalkeepers barely reacted. Defenders scattered, and it felt a bit less like football and more like someone had turned the shot power up to 1000. Anyway, this is what made RedCard different. It wasn't trying to simulate football, it wasn't trying to simulate the feeling of being in an over-the-top football action movie, and that's how it was trying to pitch itself. And once you accepted that, the game became incredibly entertaining. The thing is, underneath all the chaos, there's actually a decent football game in there. The movement was quick, matches were fast, passing felt responsive, and because the gameplay was so exaggerated, every game just felt unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen next. A perfectly normal tackle could suddenly turn into a flying 2-foot tackle and complete madness in seconds. That unpredictability made it memorable. Because modern sports games are polished, balanced, carefully designed, RedCard didn't care about balance, it cared about moments, and it created lots of them. The game did feature 32 international teams and multiple stadiums, clearly probably trying to ride the wave of the World Cup fever around 2002. But unlike official World Cup games, RedCard felt rebellious, like the anti-FIFA. While EA focused on realism and licenses, RedCard focused on entertainment. And for a certain type of player, that made it unforgettable. Of course, it was never going to become the biggest football game in the world. The time alone made that impossible, because this was the era where PES was exploding into popularity. People wanted realism, tactical depth, authenticity, and RedCard was completely the opposite of all those things. So it became something else, a cult classic. One of those games people randomly remember years later and immediately say, well, that game was insane. You're now more likely to pick up RedCard Soccer 2002 than you are to play FIFA 2002, for example. And they're right. Every now and then people still talk about it online. Not because it was technically groundbreaking, but because it changed football games forever. And also, football games never really dared to go this far. Modern football games would never allow this now. Everything today is licensed, controlled and carefully protected. A game where players are deliberately smashing into each other and putting you into orbit. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes on social media before outrage started. But maybe that's exactly why RedCard feels so refreshing looking back. It didn't care about realism, simulation, it just wanted you to have fun, and even probably targeted an audience who maybe didn't even love football. And honestly, sometimes that's enough. Because while FIFA wanted to simulate football, PES wanted to perfect it, RedCard just wanted to break your legs, and somehow that made it one of the most memorable football games of its generation. So the question is, could a football game like this ever exist again? Or was RedCard only possible in that weird early 2000 era where developers were willing to try anything? Let me know in the comments, and if you remember playing RedCard back in the day, you probably still have PTSD from those tackles. Goodbye.